everybody, it's Lindsay J back with another video, and I'm excited because today we're going to be talking about something that's kind of like a weird thing to be talking about, but we're actually going to be talking about the apocalypse and how empathy and compassion could be your ticket to actually surviving the apocalypse. And I know that sounds really crazy, but just hear me out during this episode. And if you guys ever have any thoughts during this whole episode, please make sure you comment them down below in my YouTube. If you're listening to Spotify, comment on my Spotify, or just reach out to me on Instagram. I love to hear your guys' thoughts. It always means so much to me. So let's get started with this video. Dear Diary, they always said the world would end with fire, or floods, or famine, but no one warned us about the loneliness. No one said the scariest parts of collapse wouldn't be the chaos outside. It would be the silence inside, the hollow ache of surviving in a world where nobody knows your name, where anything and everything still functions, but nothing feels, where you're surrounded by things, but no one left to call when your hands start shaking. They taught us how to run, how to stockpile, how to build fences, but no one taught us how to stay when it gets hard. How to soften in disaster, how to love in scarcity. We've been trained to protect our assets, but never trained to protect each other. And now here we are on the brink of something, a slow collapse, not made of fire, but of forgetting. Forgetting what it means to be human, forgetting what it means to be held and heard and needed. We prepared for the apocalypse like it was a movie, like it would come with sirens, smoke, and saviors, but the real end, it comes quietly. When people stop looking each other in the eye, when we scroll past suffering like it's content, when we build lives too comfortable to care, when love becomes an afterthought because survival became the only goal. But I think the truth is this. You don't survive the end of the world by hiding. You survive it by remembering, by staying soft when the world tells you to harden, by becoming the kind of person someone would run toward when everything else is falling apart. Because when the food runs out and the power grid dies and your money means nothing in the wind, the only currency left will be connection. The only shelter that matters will be trust. The only weapon worth carrying will be compassion. And maybe the real question isn't how to survive the end. Maybe the real question is, who are you when the end arrives? And what will you offer the people still standing next to you? Let's talk about it. XOXO, LJ. So what I want us to talk about first is what survives when the world ends. I want us to look at a few historical events that happened and discuss what they did in order to survive those times. Because I think that it's extremely interesting when you compare it to how we function as a society today. If the grid went out tomorrow, who would you call? And would they actually answer? Let's look at the fall of Rome. Literacy dropped by 90% in some areas. The elites clung to wealth, while aqueducts continued to crumble. Then we have tragic events like the Holocaust, where wealth offered little protection. Survival came from human networks, acts of shelter, and kindness from strangers. That was the only way that people could survive, because during that time there was such terrible, tragic things going on through the legal system and through the justice system at the time that they had nobody else to rely on except for their community. And now you fast forward to how our society functions today, and it almost feels as though if we were put into a similar situation, our society wouldn't know how to handle it properly, because we have this inability to truly connect and deepen bonds with each other. So in the event of a crisis where stuff like ChatGPT or social media and online presence can't actually help you, how would we come together as a society? How would we come together as a community? Would we know how? If the answer is no, then how do we implement that equilibrium, that level of emotional intelligence into our everyday culture? How do we introduce emotional intelligence into our everyday life in such a way that makes it safer for all of us to exist cohesively? Because I think that that is easily possible. Back in the day, it was super common for people to go over to their neighbor, ask for some sugar, ask for some salt if they ran out and couldn't head to the market just yet. You know, we used to live in a society that had a very welcoming culture. We had a really beautiful way of perceiving the world, of looking at things, of doing things, and most of it was community based. If you look all throughout history in general, the way that we were surviving historically was through communities, was through packs, through groups, through individuals who helped us to protect a common group or a common agreement. You know, the moral of the story is that we were biologically designed to work with others. We were designed for companionship, for bonding, and it is the biggest thing that we see in society right now gets pushed away. It's the thing that they almost try and advertise to us as what is weak, but when you look throughout the actual history of what it means to be a Homo sapien, which is just a scientific term for a human being, if you look through the history of Homo sapiens, you'll see that community is actually what led us to evolution. That's what led us to evolving to this degree. And it also makes me want to pose another question. Is evolution possible? Is growth possible? Is any of those things possible if we don't have others to witness it? Because how can you evolve or learn a language if you don't have someone else to speak to, right? What if for example, my brain has all the capacity to learn the language of French, but I could never truly learn the language without speaking it with someone else. I could learn it through text, I could learn it through all the different realms, but if I've never spoken it out loud to another person, how can I truly understand the language, speak the language in a way that truly matters, and especially linguistically speak the language in a way that allows for me to have bonds with other people? As somebody who speaks a second language, when this is a real linguistic study, but sometimes you have this subconscious tendency to bring out different characteristic parts of yourself based off of which language you're speaking. For example, when I speak Serbian, I've noticed that I tend to curse more. I use a lot more slang. But again, it's because culturally speaking, that was my experience with the language. That was my experience when I spoke it. And so now the way that I speak is more slang, more how they would speak it locally, I guess you could say, not as formal necessarily, more like casual speaking. And that naturally changes and alters my personality because the way that I'm speaking with others, the way that I'm showing up in conversations is a little bit different than how I show up in English, for example. So bringing that back into my beginning point is that how can you truly evolve or learn a language or understand anything if you don't have someone else to reflect it back at you? Somebody else who's either having more context than you in that department or is an equal level of you so that they can act as a mirror and reflect onto you what it is you need to take in for yourself in order to grow into that next level and begin your journey into evolution. And one more thing I want to look at is Hurricane Katrina, because FEMA failed, FEMA, and it was civilians with boats, the Cajun Navy, who saved lives. And this is, again, a perfect example of how it's community that helps us in the end, because when our corrupted governments fail, when the system fails us, we have nothing left, literally nothing left but each other. Because once the leaders have fallen apart, once the people who are supposed to guide us have fallen apart, we have nobody else but each other to rely on. And when you don't have individuals who are willing to help, you don't have individuals who are willing to get their hands dirty if it means that others can survive. You know, those individuals with boats, they didn't have to do that. They're not binded by law. They're not, first responder. They're not obligated. They're putting themselves at risk, in danger voluntarily to help their community, their individuals that they possibly have never met before, don't even know. And that is what makes a real difference. We can send money to charities that we'll never research anything about. We can send money online to those sad, advertisements that claim they're sending your money to the right place. We can do all of that. But when it really counts, how do you show up? Do you even know how? And if you don't, that's okay. But maybe the time for you to learn how to connect with others and build community is now, so that if you're put in a dangerous situation, you don't just have to store food in cans and try and survive. You have people that you can rely on. You can build communities within the chaos that helps to keep you protected, just like how they do in some of the most biggest post-apocalyptic TV shows that we know. Then groups come together, they start creating their own societies and all these things, because of course those ones end up much more corrupt and violent and bad for entertainment's sake, but in general there is a way for people to live harmoniously. But again, the main way for that to happen is for people to be able to drop their guards and their pride and their ego enough for real love, caring, understanding, empathy, and compassion to come in, because that's the only way that growth can truly happen. That is the incubator of change, and change is where success happens. People think they can become successful without changing. It's like, no, if you're in a place in your life where you're not happy where you're at, you wouldn't consider yourself, successful. Something's going to have to change in your life right now in order for you to get to that point. So to keep telling yourself that nothing is going to change, nothing can change, and I'm afraid of change, well, look, you're holding yourself back from becoming the successful version of yourself you want to be. So there's really nobody else for you to be upset with if you don't reach that point, quicker than you actually will, except for yourself, because you actively chose to go against your biology and choose individualism, because the culture fed you that belief instead of following your biological needs and making sure that you're taken care of. And by neglecting your physical needs, you're making your life more difficult on your pathway to success. And I think people forget your nervous system, the way that your brain handles things, your cortisol levels, that all heavily impacts your ability to function for anybody on the planet. When you are able to find a partner and a reliable source of peace, comfort, and even with the turmoils, they're that one stable factor in your life that even when craziness happens and things are complicated, they're always there loving you unconditionally. When you have that stability, you subconsciously, your mind literally starts to change. It starts to shift, because by natural, design, certain things that felt stressful or certain things you couldn't do on your own are now being lifted and put onto the weight of another person. The things that, you may have been doing for yourself, but is taking extra time, now gets put onto the other person. So guess what? You have all this stored energy, all this extra energy that you're no longer using for that action, because you have all that extra energy to put onto something else, to put into your growth, to put into your future, to put into what it is that you might be building. And that's the thing I wish more people understood. But too many times people get into toxic relationships, or they stay too long and they get convinced that that's what a relationship is. It's just something negative. It's going to drain you. It's going to take. But the reality is, no, that's just a toxic relationship. A real relationship pushes you. It pushes you. It pushes you past your limits. It questions all of your beliefs. It forces you to rewrite your own personal narratives. It makes you dissect yourself, question everything. That's just a part of love. And if you go anywhere and you research it anywhere, that is actually one of the biggest signs that you have found somebody who is real love for you. But people run away too soon and they give up. And so they miss out and they don't realize that what they're running from is a situation that would have never occurred, because the person that they're with is not toxic, And I'm like, you're missing out so much, because like all the things that you do that are taxing and all this stuff, by having your partner do those things, you're literally creating extra energy for yourself. Like, your partner should become an energy source. They shouldn't be draining you. They shouldn't be becoming like this, loan on you or some, encroachment on you in any way. They should be like an exponential growth. This is supposed to be your teammate at life. You guys are supposed to be building together, growing together, leveling up together, building mindsets together, just building, growing, creating empires, making money, doing things, having fun. That is what life is about. And sometimes people get lost in the traditional route. They get lost because they keep getting hit and hit and hit with these beliefs that they've been fed. And eventually, when you've been fed something enough, you start to be convinced that that's the only food source that's out there, when it's not. You got all these Michelin star restaurants and beautiful things, plates and plates and plates with 6-course meals, when you only envision 3, okay? And that's why I'm saying out there to people all the time, don't be afraid of yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you have trust issues, guess what? You don't mistrust the other person. It's not the other person you mistrust. It's yourself. You don't trust yourself because you don't trust your ability to get over what could happen if things failed. You're so afraid of failing because you don't know if you can handle the break, that instead of risking it now, you're preparing yourself for a situation that honestly could have never happened. And so, and it's ironic because then what happens is people speed up that process and they'll actually make the situation they didn't want to happen. They'll make it actually happen quicker in the attempts to avoid it happening later, which again doesn't make sense. And when you're functioning from a fear-based logic, fear-based mentality, you got to start questioning, is this really my reality, or is this just a creation? Because if life is what we make it, right? And we are the authors of our own book, but we went to a school that taught us that we need to write a certain way. That doesn't mean that you can't change the book. It just means that you're going against the teachers and the people that taught you. I hope people understand what I'm trying to say. These are some analogies and metaphors, but again, the point is, I want people to seriously think about the irony. Just think about this for a second, right? We're talking about scenarios like the Holocaust. Look at what is going on in our world right now. Look what's going on in our world right now. During times like that, the only thing that kept people safe, the only thing that made people able to be alive to this day to tell the story and to move forward was through their community. It was through people who had the ability to do nothing and chose to do something because they cared about other people. They had empathy, compassion, and love for others. They didn't listen to the dehumanization of these individuals. They didn't listen to those things because their love for others, the people, for understanding human lives, was deeper than what the world was telling them to believe. And guess what? It successfully ended, and now it's a part of our history. This means that we shouldn't be allowing a situation like that to occur again. But guess what? Now we live in a hyper-individualist society that completely discourages connection and bonds and convinces individuals, especially men from a young age, and men are our strongest. I know that sounds very sexist, but I'm a little traditional in this. I believe that men are, like, biologically speaking, born stronger. They have aspects of, I don't think that means that women can't be stronger than a man. I'm just saying biologically, historically speaking, the men were the hunter-gatherers, women were there. So biologically, they're kind of designed in a way that unless women were to actually put in the effort, they naturally by design tend to be a little bit more powerful. So what happens? You take the most powerful people in our world and you start pushing them down. You start pushing them down so that you can convince them enough that they're not good enough until they get this one thing. And guess what? You created that one thing and you know that it's unattainable, but you keep pushing them down because they're the strongest ones in the kingdom. So if some crap went down at the top, these are the individuals who would step up and really turn things and keep things going. So if that's the case, who are they going to get into the mentality of? Who are they going to burn out the most in a corporate setting? The individuals with the most intelligence, the individuals with the most power, because those individuals are the worst people to stand up against not just injustice, but just really anything that they don't like. Their intelligence is unmatched. It's just kind of how it goes. So they convince the individuals that they're not good enough, so they don't even get the energy to fight. Their energy to fight is so low, they don't even start thinking about fighting because they're so tired from being pushed down from the individuals trying to convince them that hyper individualism and living their lives a certain way is so important, when history has literally shown us that the only way for us to rise against oppression, rise against hatred, rise against misfortune throughout history all over the world, and no matter what country you go to, which languages they're speaking, it was community that helped them get through those times. And what is the one thing they're trying to take from us right now? Is community. So guess what? If something like a Holocaust were to happen tomorrow, I'm not saying like it needs to be that extreme, but if there was a tragic event that happened tomorrow, because of our lack of community, we would literally be in so much risk and danger. We'd be so vulnerable. And governments and people with power, they know that. So they continue to ingrain this hyper individualist belief into your head so that you think that that's the right way when it's not. I'm sorry to tell you. But again, you cannot evolve if there is no one else on the other side speaking to you in the process of that change. It just can't happen. And people try to change the trajectory. They try to fight against it. They do. They always do. They try to pretend and think that they're stronger than their biology, that they can somehow logic their way out of their own biological design. And it doesn't successfully work. You either confront it or it stays ingrained in you forever. And that to me is much worse than just confronting it. And that's why I think community, love, encouragement, like just all the things, reconciliation, understanding after misfortune. Like, I just feel like those are such important things. And again, they don't teach it because they don't want people to understand that if something bad were to occur, the only thing that throughout history has proven to be able to combat and literally lead to the collapse of really deep curated infrastructures worldwide, of course they're going to try and disable it, I'm just saying. Now, I can sound like I'm, what are those people who are like into conspiracy theories and everything? But I don't know, guys. I'm just saying, think about it. They used to do marches, all types of protests, and that's how they would get things. If we're living in a world where like people are so scared to talk to each other, even scared to go outside, so much so that they don't even want to help each other, not because they don't care, because they're scared to. I mean, how in the world is that a society that could possibly fight against oppression? It doesn't make sense, and it can't. And the more that we use technology and the more we spend time on it, the more they can influence what we do and how we watch it and all these things. And they can justify their behavior using various legal terminology and jargon that the average civilian wouldn't understand. And that's why they can cover up such treacherous things. And eventually it comes out much later, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still happening. What we see on the news is just what they allow us to see. That's like touching the surface in comparison to what's actually going on, especially worldwide. So keep that in mind. I feel like I always have pets everywhere. Like, they're always just getting on me. Now I want to talk about how empathy is actually evolution, not just emotion. And I want to say this because I feel as though empathy is a biological survival strategy. In neuroscience, anthropology, indigenous wisdom has always equated to compassion as infrastructure. One of the things that our brains have are called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are pretty much our brain being hardwired to simulate the emotions of others. And that's like empathy as a reflex, not a weakness. It's just kind of a part of our biology to feel and care. Unless you have certain mental health disorders that take away your ability to feel and experience empathy and compassion, because that does exist. But for a typical individual, most humans, we have mirror neurons that make us hardwired to simulate the emotions of others, which is also why we are capable of having empathy. So now we can talk about the anthropology of survival. Tribal societies prioritized caregiving as survival. Multi-generational systems, grandmother hypothesis, for example, evolved to protect offspring via collective empathy. And African Ubuntu, I am because we are. This isn't sentiment, it's a survival code. And I feel like that is a perfect representation on how in the real tangible world, like when you're faced with like the wild and things like that, or, just things that are leading back to pre-civilization, which to me is the most true form of survival. We have all these gadgets and trinkets now because of the fact that we decided to make our lives easier and easier. That's why we're evolving. It's actually us regressing our survival instincts and then progressing the parts of us in which we feel inadequate. Not necessarily in a bad way. I feel right now most of everything is in a bad way, but I don't think it has to be that way, nor do I think it will be that way forever. And one of the other things is a tend and befriend response, which is especially in women. We have stress responders that favor community building over conflict. It's part of what makes us so nurturing. It's a part of our biological feminine instinct to want to kind of lean towards a more nurturing energy. Sometimes I do wonder, though, if that actually comes from, where that comes from. Part of me wonders if there are certain men who have higher estrogen or progesterone, which are both, they're both things that are usually in women. If their testosterone is low, but that is up, I wonder if they have that same desire of nurture, if it really is about gender, or if it's actually about the balance of how your personal, DNA is. You know what I mean? We can even see this in the wildlife. I mean, there's so many animals that have their own way of protecting each other. They have ways of tending to each other. I mean, there's animals out there in the wild, and obviously they don't have medikits. They don't have, what we have currently in our world. They don't have doctors, so they have to come up with their own ways. And their ways of doing that tend to go through a more holistic approach because they have no other choice. So that shows us that even other animals, other creatures, we are animals, of course, but most people don't see themselves as an animal. They, for some reason, associate being a human to I don't even know what, maybe being superior or something. But in general, we're all animals. And the rest of the animal kingdom, they don't have all the gadgets and trinkets, but they're still out here surviving and doing things because they rely on each other. They don't have schools, so they help with each other. That's why packs exist, or certain groups exist where each person has a designated function for the overall community, but not in a way that takes away their pride, rights, independence. It's not at the detriment of their actual being, I feel like in most modern societies, it's they'll teach you things that could be useful, but it's at the detriment of your happiness, your time, your money, your effort. It's taking you away from the things that could actually fuel you and convincing you that working for others or building for other people is actually the way to build when it's not. The smartest way to build is to use the corporate world to accumulate enough money to start investing into real estate. If anything, if I were anybody out there who has a lump sum of money sitting around, I would suggest you put your money into the market as well as into real estate, and turn all your real estate into investment properties. Get some tenants in there and you are chilling passively, okay? You can start having a property for each singular hobby or goal or thing that you want. One for vacations, travels, and fun. One for rent or mortgage or however you're living. There's so many ways that you could start expanding that will help you to stay financially free and actually get out of that 9-to-5 mentality or 9-to-5 reality that you live in. These are things that are tangible. These are things that are real. There are people who have done this. It's not something that's unrealistic, but they want you to believe that it's unrealistic, or they want you to believe that it's statistically rare so that you don't even try to attempt it. Because here's the real thing. It's is it really statistically rare for people to become successful? Or do you think that a majority of the people who don't try because they don't feel worthy? right? But how many of us feel unworthy for the biggest things we've ever received in our lives, right? So it's like, statistically speaking, it's not necessarily accurate because statistics don't account for human beings. And that's the danger behind statistics. It doesn't account for real people, doesn't count for emotions and feelings and nuances that are extremely important when discussing other people and relationships and bonds and connections, you know. It can only work to a certain extent. Eventually, it just kind of starts to run out, you know. And I want to ask you guys, like, if you were given one backpack after, like, everything collapses, the grid goes completely black, wipe out, are you going to fill your backpack only with weapons, or are you going to fill it with memories or trinkets and, you know, I don't know, warmth, love? What are you taking with you if you have to leave your home? Just weapons or memories too? And if the answer is memories, that shows you what your heart chooses to prioritize. And again, I hope most people would have chosen to bring some trinkets with them from their home in the case of a crisis where they may never see their loved ones again, you know. I would hope that a lot of people would want to keep something to think of them. And if that is the case, again, by default, by nature, all of us, regardless of the gender, tend to really care about human connection, human experiences, and yet we cut ourselves out from it. And then our society, our propaganda, our news, our everything fuels into that fear, and that fuels into that anxiety that everybody kind of has, and it makes you just want to stay isolated. And it benefits the corporations, but it's super unhealthy for the quality of life for the individual stuck in that kind of a societal dynamic. You know, now we're seeing people working multiple jobs and still living paycheck to paycheck, you know. Things are not going well for a lot of people, and for some reason we still want to, like, you know, pretend like that's not a reality. Instead, we would rather just complain about it or look at how other people are handling it when it comes to online media. But we don't actually do anything ourselves because it would actually risk us doing something. And again, though, in the event of a crisis, that's all you have. Like, that's why it can be kind of scary to see how disconnected people are, because it's like, if something happens, right, like, all we have are our literal neighbors. It's like, people don't realize, if the internet goes down, if everything's shut down, you're not going to be able to call your family in other cities or states. You're not going to be able to just casually use a GPS to figure out where to go. These things are shut down. The only things you can rely on are the people who are around you. That's it. And if that's all you have around you at the time when you're in a crisis and you're extremely vulnerable, obviously you're at a head start if you've already started formulating a positive rapport with your community around you. Now you're going to have much more support and protection because there are people who you have positive experiences with, and we tend to protect the things that we have had positive experiences with. So don't disrespect others, or don't ignore others' pain or struggles or people in general. And then when something happens, expect them to be there for you and give to you and all those things. Too many people they have this false entitlement, like they're entitled to somebody else's kindness, and it's like, no, you're not. That's why you should be, you know, very grateful whenever someone is kind to you, because they didn't have to be kind. Being kind is a choice, and if somebody's going out of their way to be kind to you, there's a reason. They probably experienced some bad stuff and learned how to project kindness because of it, because they don't want other people to feel that way. So guess what? They could be on their last string, struggling that day. Maybe they're not making as many tips as they usually do, and things are hard at home, and they are choosing to show up and be kind to you. So if I were you, I would appreciate the kindness instead of taking it for granted and just expecting that everybody should be nice to you. For what? For existing? I'm sorry, but that's just not good enough. You can't just exist in the world and expect for things to happen positively. You need to be showing up for not just the people around you, but yourself. And the more you show up for others, the more you show up for yourself, because the people we keep with us are a reflection of who we are in that moment. If you push away the people who reflect your highest self, that shows you're afraid of who you could be. If you're pushing away the people at your level in order to grow, that means you are ready to take over and become that next version of you, that higher self version of you. You're willing to do the work, do the hard stuff of cutting off the old, rebuilding the new, and figuring it out now, and just reframing your mindset on those things and how it should go and how life should be. It's important because there are people out here living their dreams, living their biggest dreams. I mean, I'm slowly starting to grow and live my dream, and I see that it's possible. There are days when I never thought it would be possible, but it is. So no matter what your job is, no matter what your education level is, no matter who you are, no matter what, there are opportunities out there for you, but you just have to go and find them. And I know that some people have more privilege than others. Some people were dealt more cards than others at the beginning, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. That doesn't mean you're not worthy of it. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. And it doesn't mean that you give up when you fail. Because guess what? Everybody fails. The people who don't fail and they get everything, you don't want to be like them, because they're the ones who are causing harm. They're the ones who take everything for granted. They're the ones who are selfish, who are greedy. You don't want to be that. So take your losses and realize that at the end of the day, when you look at your lifespan and you look at your life's journey in total, you'll realize that the losses were actually wins. Because even in the losses, the things that you lost weren't worthy of being in your life to begin with. And at the moment, it seemed hard, it seemed scary. But when you look back at your life, like a single lifespan, you'll realize in the grand scheme of things, it didn't actually matter. What mattered is how I felt, who was in my life at the time when I felt that way, and do I want to feel that way or not? Life doesn't have to be so complicated, but people make it more complicated than it needs to be, I swear. And sometimes because I have like a gifted ability to understand people, it can be so difficult because I watch people constantly contradict themselves, and they contradict themselves in ways that are actually harmful to their self-growth. And even people who say that they want to be introspective or heal or grow or be more in their journey, even they sometimes will hit walls or hit moments where they can't actually handle the journey because it requires them to really question and also face the parts of themselves that they may have spent a long time trying to not just protect, but also suppress in order to protect themselves from the very valid issues that they had once experienced, But sometimes people have to realize that once we're adults or once we leave our abusive partners, we are now capable of creating the life we want, no matter what that means. And we don't have to use the same protective skills and tactics that we needed on those individuals in this new life that we're building, because those tactics, those same things that we may have taught ourselves to build, could also be the things that lead to our downfall once we're faced with something that challenges it. And would you want to self-sabotage your self-growth because you're afraid to look in the mirror of who you could be instead of, being comfortable with who you are? I mean, again, people just need to sit and realize there's a lot of value in connection, in community, in romance. And I will live by that. I believe that love is a revolutionary force. And I will spend every single day of the rest of my life proving that. I don't care how many times I get heartbroken. I don't care how many times I have to, wipe my tears off my face and, stitch back together my soul after being cracked. I don't care how many times I have to rebuild. I want to show the world that regardless of how many times you get hurt, no matter how much the world tries to make you cold, it is so much more worth it to choose kindness and to choose community than it is to choose being alone and not helping others. Because I know people who have tons of people around them, so many what they would call friends, but at the end of the day, they feel deeply lonely. And it's because the version of them that their friends like are the versions of them that are curated by design, not real. Not necessarily in a bad way, but when there's just that dissonance, like, and sometimes I think it's most times I think it's subconscious, but it's like people, they build lives around their egotistical, and I don't necessarily mean ego in a bad way, guys. This isn't always it doesn't mean like you're a bad person. I'm just using it in a literal sense. But like, people can become a little egotistical with those types of things, and again, it will lead to their downfall. And it's always subconscious, and that's the part that makes it so frustrating, because people can't see it until, not necessarily it's too late, but so much time was wasted, essentially. We'll look back on our lives one day and we'll realize all the time we had was not that much time. We'll realize one day, we'll wake up and we're older and we'll be like, wow, it just felt like yesterday I was such and such age. It just felt like yesterday I was doing this thing, and now we're on our deathbed. And life is such a fragile thing. It's beautiful, but it's fragile. It's like a beautiful, blown out piece of glass. It's so gorgeous, and it can last, but if you're careful, and that's why I'm saying, I think that people need to seriously start thinking about their lives, the way they show up. Because once you start to build a life around this egotistical facade, this image that you've created, it's like you've lost yourself at that point, because now you're just spending all of your life trying to prove to the rest of the world, and maybe even to yourself, that version of you is real when it isn't. And it isn't. Nobody else does, but you do. You feel it, because when you come home, it's a big sigh, breath of relief, because you finally get to feel like yourself again. And if you're coming home and that's where you feel like you can be you, then the version of you that you're showing up as when you leave the home is most likely not really you. And it's something we see especially in the entertainment industry. So I think that that's a very complex thing. And I think it's one of the main reasons why people end up staying so distanced from each other, is because of the fact that they're so wrapped up in their own issues, their own desires, their own insecurities, that like when you're so self-focused on your own issues, it's really hard to show up for other people. That doesn't make you a bad person. It means that our society is running on individuals who are inherently unhealthy and most likely mentally ill. And again, I don't mean this in a bad way, but statistically speaking, our numbers of various mental health disorders are skyrocketing. And you know what? I bet they were probably high back in the day, but too many people kept it hidden because they didn't want to go to the loony bin and have somebody drill holes into the side of their head. So, we're figuring things out. We're humans and we're figuring things out. And we need to take it more seriously, but we aren't. So in reality, we have a whole society of people who are deeply traumatized and also having a really hard time dealing with that trauma and understanding their emotions, because they don't actively spend enough quality time with other individuals. And I don't mean time, aka going to work and talking to your colleagues. I mean like quality time with other people platonically, in a way that's not destructive. In a way that's not destructive, in a way that's actually good, doing positive, fun, little cute activities with friends. They're little things, but they actually make a huge difference. And it's like people don't realize the things that bring down your cortisol levels, the things that make your nervous system calm, while they may be scary sometimes and come across as a threat, they're actually not. Because when your body gets to that state, you're able to get to that workflow and that meditative flow state much quicker, because your nervous system has the space to navigate both. It navigates both terrains, because what happens is you're co-regulating with another person. And co-regulation is actually a biological need that humans have. But we're not taught about co-regulation. We're taught about how we need to regulate ourselves, how we are. And again, that feeds into my theory that it's because the further we get into technology, the more ideal it is for the consumers to be in isolation. They become more predictable that way. It doesn't actually help us. It actually helps the people in power because they're weakening our strength against them so that in the event of something bad happening, we lack the social skills and capacity to even fight back, which is really nerve-wracking. So that's just something to think about. So let's talk about how global crisis equates to local love. In the real world collapses, people, not individuals in power, of course, save each other. Even international disaster studies have shown personal moral accountability. Like COVID-19 in Italy, for example, 90% of people in community surveys said balcony singing helped emotionally stabilize them. And that is like literally the most perfect example of how the community came together. Of course, it was Italy, not America. But the community came together for the greater good and decided to help each other. You had DJs who were performing live sets, and then eventually the rest of the world decided to start hopping on the trend and doing the same thing. But look how that was such a beautiful way that the community came together to try and solve the issue of loneliness, of sadness, of isolation, and it worked. 90% of people in community surveys said that it helped emotionally stabilize them. And COVID was probably one of the worst mental health, disasters we've had. And of course it was. I mean, it put so many people in isolation for a very long time, which is just, it was a lot, man. That was a lot. I'm so glad we're done with that. That was a lot. We spent years, multiple years in a lockdown, not just in one country, but worldwide. Guys, that's so crazy. Then you had the Beirut explosion in 2020, where civilians used Google spreadsheets to organize aid within hours. This was before most governments even responded. Another perfect example of when people decide to take matters into their own hand for the greater good, quicker things happen. There's more of us than there is of them. So by deflecting everything onto our governments, when we know that every government in the world has corruption in it, it's just unstable and unreliable. At this point, we need to start taking our own accountability. I'm not going to start waiting until the very last minute to start caring about others, trying to be good for my community. I give back all the time. I volunteer a lot. I do all types of things to try and be a part of my community in a way that's helpful, helping us to evolve and change. Because what people don't understand is that without each other, it's like literally impossible to evolve. You can't evolve into that next level without, confronting your fears, your ego, your pride. Because if you think that you can become your higher self while holding on to your fear and your pride and your ego, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. You have to drop that stuff, because the life that you truly want, the life that we all desire, and the life that we all deserve is a life that isn't going to be handed over easily. If you're taught a lesson, they're going to give you something that tests your ability to handle situations. If you don't handle the situation properly, you're showing to the world that you're not ready for the life that you want, when you are. But your actions are keeping you stuck. It's like you're running in a hamster wheel, hoping that you'll get to the bigger hamster wheel without realizing that you got to go onto the gravel in order to get there, and you're afraid to step onto the gravel, because it might be hot and it might hurt. And you stay stuck in this little hamster wheel while your body starts to grow out of it. And eventually you start to get, be unhappy and living in this kind of a world where you're just like constantly on a hamster wheel that's too small. Of course you're going to be miserable. Of course you will. But because people try to deny their biological need for bonding, for human interaction, for relationships of all kinds, especially romantic, it's like people are really closed off. They're so fearful. They have so much pride, so much ego that it leads to their downfall. And they use all types of excuses to try and justify it. The one that is the most common is the whole it's better for them, but it's not. You're just deflecting blame because you don't want to admit that what you did was wrong. That's just kind of what it is. I hate that people are like that too, because I don't understand what's wrong with making mistakes. I don't know why people make it such a big deal. I have so many situations where I'll connect with someone and then they get scared of how real the long-term future we have could be. And so the second that something happens, they just run away. And I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, how in the world do you expect yourself to be able to handle the turbulences of life if you can't even handle a basic conversation with someone because you're afraid of looking some kind of way, or you're afraid of failure, or you're afraid of talking about your needs? To me, that doesn't make sense. It's illogical. I get it maybe from like an emotional standpoint, but from like a neuroscience and psychological standpoint, it doesn't actually make sense. Our bodies do better when we're with others. Our bodies do better when we can co-regulate, and studies have proven that we do better when we have a main attachment figure, a romantic partner who we can rely on and go to. It's just a part of life. But for some people, it's like they experience one bad thing, or they have one bad trauma or a few bad traumas, and they use that to justify disconnecting from others. And it's like, if you got this far, why do you think you can't handle it now? That's the other thing that doesn't make sense. It's like you're so afraid of heartbreak. You're so afraid of a disaster happening that you prematurely caused the rupture to happen, even though you were trying to avoid it. Like, that's why it doesn't make sense to me. It's very illogical. It's very disorganized. And to me, conversations don't need to be that way. I think that things are very simple. I think conversations are simple. I think making mistakes is actually a beautiful opportunity for excitement to happen. But like, people turn it into like such a bad thing. And I'm like, you do realize that we get the power to redefine words. We get the power to redefine what things mean to us. If conflict in your life has always been bad, are you seriously going to be satisfied with that and just say, okay, everything's bad? Or are you going to manipulate your life, become an alchemist of your own design, and just curate a different environment with somebody who doesn't act like that? But because you're basing everything off of a scale that's outdated, based off somebody who mistreated you or whatever the heck, you're now missing out on such a beautiful life, a beautiful experience, and honestly, a jump start to your trajectory, all because of your fear to drop your ego, drop your pride, and admit that you need things, that you don't know what you're doing sometimes. And just, again, it doesn't make sense to me. I think it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't even make sense to me logistically, because I'm like, you guys realize that even logistically speaking, it is easier to have a partner. It's easier to be in a community. That's why if you're in a crisis, it becomes a local community issue. It's not just government what they do. They can't do anything. They can't do anything. We're all miserable already, so they clearly can't do anything. Obviously. I mean, look at it this way. People like already are unhappy because they're living month to month. They're paying rent to rent. They can't afford to live the lives they want anyways. You seriously think most people want 9-to-5 job? No, everybody wants the same thing. They just want a happy life. They want to be able to make some good love, eat some good food, drink some good wine, do a little drugs sometimes, laugh and have fun and live life and be happy. That's what we all want for our families, our loved ones, people we care about. It's just what we all want. So it's like, why can't we see that we all have this greater desire for something good? And why can't we all try to attain it together? I just don't see why. We're all fighting and aiming towards the same thing. So why is it that we're doing all these things separately, divided, segregated? It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. Logically, psychologically, neuroscientifically. I mean, in all of the ways, it doesn't actually make sense to me. And then even in Japan's 2011 tsunami, social cohesion led to lower mortality. Villages with tight bonds saw drastically reduced death tolls, which makes sense because they all know each other very well. And one of the great things about knowing each other so well is that you know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And so the individuals who have strengths and weaknesses that complement each other, then the community can work together for the greater good, you see? That's one of the other beauties in acknowledging when you're not good at something, acknowledging when you need help with things, or acknowledging that you're in a tough spot, because like it's in those moments where you have the most opportunity for growth and excitement and happiness, and especially in a relationship, love. I mean, so much love comes after conflict, but because so many people are used to a version of love or a version of conflict that doesn't end well, it's like they are breathing and expecting and holding their breath every time there's a disagreement because they think it's going to end in a disaster. And it's like, well, none of my conflicts have ended in a disaster, so I don't know what that looks like. honestly, I'm very good at conflict resolution, and also I don't really have like a very energetic response when it comes to things. When I'm upset, I kind of tend to become more. When I'm upset, I tend to become more mute. I don't talk as much, or I just get really tired and overwhelmed and just don't really know what to say. But I'll show up, unlike a lot of people who will just drop off. I'm like, look, I may not be able to say any words right now because I'm really tired and frustrated from the frustration, but I'm still here. You know, I'm still going to show up because that's real. And people don't want to be real, and then they turn around and question why their life sucks or why they're doing things they don't want to be doing. It's like, yeah, well, this is what happens when you ignore what your heart wants, you ignore what life is giving you and putting these opportunities in front of you because you're trying to logic your way out of success, and you think that that logic is making sense as to your path to success. But what you're not understanding is that there is no one path to success. So if you are climbing stairs, right, and you have blue step, red step, blue step, right? And you're like, okay, I'm going to step on the blue, then I'm going to step on the red, then I'm going to step on the blue. But that last blue turns to yellow, and then you see red again. It's like, are you going to stop there until the blue comes back, even though you never know when it's coming? Or are you going to take a step on the yellow, even though you haven't seen that color yet and you don't know what that step means? You're going to go on it, right? Because right after that is the red, which means that you're back to the beginning of where you started, but at a higher level now, and that's the point. But too many people, they'll get stuck. They'll step onto the yellow step, then get scared of the fact that everything's fine and go back down. And it's like you're stepping back now. You're going back a step in your journey because of your own fear, ego, and pride. You know how bad that is? There are Greek mythological leaders who have become literally hubris. That term is from the Greek mythological guy. I can't remember. It's like Hubert or something. I can't remember all the way. But that's where the term hubris comes from. He had so much pride that it led to his downfall. He literally died as a, as a reasoning behind him having too much pride, too much ego. And that's what I'm telling people. I'm like, look, you're subconsciously putting yourself into an invisible noose when you live like this. There is no one way or one path to success. You're capable of hitting all the marks in any of the ways that you want, but you have to believe that you're capable of doing it, even if it makes you feel delusional, even if it makes you feel like, wow, this is so unrealistic. It doesn't matter, because your head will try to convince you to protect your heart, but your heart knows better. And that's why it's disappointing, because I'm like, look, before language even existed, there was no logic to rely on. There was no psychology. There was no neuroscience. When people were, dealing with each other, there was no language. All they could do was express, right? And I'm like, I wish we could go back to that, because, man, it just, I don't know. I want people to really think about how they're showing up in their lives, because when disaster strikes, wealth becomes static and compassion becomes kinetic. And you can think about this too, that billionaires can buy land, but they can't buy loyalty in a blackout. Only your humanity carries you through. Now let's talk about collapse, conspiracy, and the lie of control. Because division is designed and fear is a product. Interdependence is the real truth. And the main reason I say that is because even we can see this example even in indigenous cultures, where people, rely on each other in order to really come together and build a strong community. There's a lot of benefits when it comes to building with other people, building with someone else, because we are just not creatures who are biologically designed to be independent. We were biologically designed to bond with others, to be a part of community, especially when language didn't exist yet, especially when tech wasn't a thing yet, especially when, mailing things wasn't really something that could be done easily. People were forced to connect with the individuals in their community, in their local vicinity. And I think that we've lost a lot of that, because nowadays people are very transactional when they go about their relationships, even their friendships. And so it's like, okay, well, if this person isn't feeding into me in the way that will benefit me in some kind of a way, then there's no real reason for me to connect to them. But that's the thing. You don't know how someone could benefit you. not all of the best things we learn from others or the best things we get from somebody has to do with monetary success or materialistic things. It doesn't have to do with that. Sometimes lessons are what you take away from people, and even that alone is a beautiful journey. There's nothing wrong with learning lessons, but too many times people are afraid of them. People are afraid to, really confront their own issues, confront their own fears and ego and pride. And so because of that, it leaves them stuck. It keeps them stuck in a cycle where, you're just kind of on a hamster wheel and you're trying to get to the next hamster wheel. But the irony is, in order to get to the other hamster wheel, you have to walk on the gravel, and you're afraid of the gravel. So you never go, but you keep growing in this hamster wheel that's too small. That's how most people are living their lives nowadays. I mean, let's take, a few tech billionaires, for example, and how they're preparing for a post-apocalyptic scenarios. You have Zuckerberg, who bought 1,500 acres in Hawaii. Then you have Peter Thiel, can never know how to spell or pronounce his last name, secured a secret citizenship in New Zealand, and Sam Altman, OpenAI CEO, admitted to stockpiling biohazard prep gear. Why are they preparing to leave instead of helping fix? I mean, they have the finances to make a massive difference, yet they choose to only protect themselves. Sometimes I wonder if they would even protect their loved ones, But the irony in it is, what they don't understand is, even if you were to use a jetpack, right, to get, or your jet plane to get there to where you're trying to go in the midst of a crisis, unless you're going to include your pilot's family and all their people and everybody they know, then you're not flying anywhere, because the person who flies your jet all the time is a real person who has a life outside of this. And because you never respected them, or you never cared about their family or their well-being, there's no way they're going to be flying your jet to your 1,500 acres for what? So that you can be cool, you can be fine. So it's like, Zuckerberg, you better learn how to fly your own planes, become a pilot, because nobody's flying you to Hawaii if something wrong happens, okay? Same with you too, Peter. Sam Altman stockpiling biohazard prep gear is a little scary, I will say. But at this point of time, I will say people are a little bit scary. But the main reason why that can be a little creepy is because, this is the CEO of OpenAI, which is the person who does like everything having to do with ChatGPT. And obviously, if he's the creator of this, he probably interacts with AI in a way that we just simply do not. And he probably has an understanding of it that we don't. He probably even asks it questions that we possibly could never think of, because we don't understand the functionalities behind the system itself in the way that he does intimately. So it's like, what if he's been talking to ChatGPT or talking to one of his AI systems, and it's telling him that he should be preparing, that he should be stockpiling biohazard things? And it's like, well, why? What is it that we're so afraid of? And if you're willing to invest all this money into preparation for something bad happening, then why is it that you're unwilling to invest money into keeping the area safe so that you don't have to do that, And this is also why I feel like capitalism is a lie. You have rugged individualism, which was created to keep people dependent on systems and not each other, because true independence is interdependence. That's the part that people don't understand, is that there's interdependence. Because in interdependence, what you have is you have somebody else who's helping you to co-regulate your emotions. And again, people don't value their nervous system. They don't value cortisol levels in any way, shape, or form. They don't understand the importance of those things and how that system can actually interact with your quality of life every single day and how you show up in the world. But when you have a healthy dependence upon someone else who's able to take care of the needs that you have that you're unable to take care of yourself, you show up better in the rest of your life, which leads to quicker success, higher capacity of functioning. Just everything's like, it's like you, but you're supercharged because you have that source of stability, that source of constant regulation, co-regulation. Even when there's turbulence, you have that stability, that one grounding factor. Nowadays, it's like they just don't know what they're doing. Like, people are floating around, acting like they're cool, acting like they're something, acting like they need to figure everything out on their own, and then talking about how they want to heal when they fail to realize that healing does require for them to put themselves into situations that may be fearful, put them in situations that may scare them, put them in situations that are new, uncomfortable, there's uncertainty, there's no real logic to it. Because what people don't understand is that a lot of times I've noticed, and the thing that's so scary is that sometimes fear can dress itself up as logic. So people will try and logic their way out of things, when in reality they're not logicking their way out. They're actually just using a fear-based mentality, and then their brain is like telling them that it is a justifiable reason, when in reality it's not. But because the individual doesn't have a healthy understanding or a model or embodiment of what a healthy relationship looks like, their expectations versus the reality are very different. So when you're comparing situations right now to situations that happened in the past that have harmed you, you're kind of cracking the lens in which you perceive the situation in front of you. So instead of looking at the situation for what it is, you're looking at the situation for what it could be in a bad way. You're looking at yourself in a way where something bad happens because you look at yourself in a bad way. And it's like, okay, but if you're creating narratives that lead to your downfall or our downfall or its downfall, how can you call that confidence? How can you call that logic? How can you call that certainty? It's not certainty. You're not certain that that will be the outcome. You're convincing yourself that you're certain because you're fearful of what could happen if that does happen, even though the chances of it happening are zero, close to none. You know what I mean? So you miss out. Instead of just experiencing life, instead of going with the flow of things, instead of understanding the world through communication, through community, through understanding, people push it away and they act like, oh my God, like everything is wrong with feeling, with caring. I can't heal and grow with someone. I have to do this myself. And it's like, no, you're trying to logic your way out of actually growing. And that's the sad, ironic part about it all. It's like, you're telling yourself that this is helping you, but it's not. It's actually just self-sabotage dressed up as logic. It's fear convincing you that it makes sense when it actually doesn't. Your biological needs, so your neuroscience, your psychology, everything is screaming at you, telling you you need connection. I know so many of my friends out there, they're like still watching their exes, still like attached to all their people. And we talk about it all the time. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just to say that the heart knows way more than the brain does. If you're still super connected to someone, it's because it means something. It's not like it's just whatever. Like people just do things and act like it has no impact on the world. It's like, no, your presence does make a difference. And when you act like it doesn't, you start to harm the others around you. Not because you're doing it on purpose, but because you devalue yourself so much that you take yourself out of equations where you actually meant everything, where you were the final answer. And because you felt like you weren't worthy of being the final answer, you took yourself out of the equation. To me, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense. It's not possible to even evolve or grow or become something more if you're afraid of being uncomfortable, sitting in the discomfort. How can you possibly grow and evolve if you can't even confront your own ego, pride, and fears? If you can't even confront yourself and you can't communicate your weaknesses, you can't communicate your struggles, how in the world are you going to evolve into that next level? I don't think that's gonna work. And the more you continue to grow in your outside life and fail to evolve with your heart, the harder and harder it is for you to run back to yourself, back to your own centered happiness. I know there's a quote out there, and I probably won't say it word for word properly, but there's like a quote out there that basically talks about how, if you were on a train, the farther away you get from home, the more money it will cost for you to get back, okay? So the more you keep running from yourself, the more you keep running from home, the more you keep running from the things that are making you truly happy in order to appease society's version of who they think you should be, not versus who you want to be and who you are, but who you think you should be, based off of standards and expectations that don't have anything to do with you, but were actually planted and ingrained in you. It's like, who are you if you weren't like taught to believe this way? Who would you really be? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up? Because that's where you begin your life, is when you take yourself back. You say, you know what? I am not going to keep running away from me, because the further away I run, the harder it gets, the more expensive it gets, the more costly it is for me to come home. Just remember that. And that's exactly what leads me to feel like love is the final infrastructure. The only thing we can rebuild from is empathy. Even at Harvard, there was a happiness study that started in 1938, and it's even still going on today in 2025, and it's the longest running adult development study, and it showed that the quality of our relationships is the number one predictor of long-term happiness, resilience, and longevity. This is exactly why I tell people, I'm like, you're running away from the very things that will help you to become the person that you want to be. And then you're turning around at the world, turning around at yourself, looking in the mirror and asking why you don't have the life that you want. Well, this is why. You're not willing to put in the work. You thought this was easy. You thought this was just going to, things were going to happen how you wanted. No, if you're meant to learn a lesson, they don't give you the answers. They give you a bunch of different equations, and it's your responsibility to answer every single one of them, get them right, and get graded. If not, that is what life is all about. Life is just one big test, one big simulation and illusion. That's why I like to think in fractals. I'm like, okay, well, every decision is an opportunity for me to infiltrate myself into a different fragmented reality. Because I believe that there's let's just say that there were multiverses that existed, and in every time that you were faced with a decision, it splits, because in that moment you're going to take the path. There could be different paths, and each path exists just on different timelines with different expectations. If that is the case, which timeline do I want to be a part of? That is the one that I will chase. But the problem is like, people get in the way of their own success because they start to think like, oh, but what would society say is okay? What would other people say is okay? And if they don't think that's okay, like if family has made you feel bad, if you've been with a partner who made you feel bad, like people don't take that stuff seriously, especially men. And it's like so annoying. I'm like, dude, you're allowed to be sad too, and you're allowed to be sad in my arms. Like, you don't have to keep feeling that now as an adult you're required to live the life that you had as a child. Like, no, we're recreating our lives. You are an adult now. We can do what we want. We can live how we want. We can fight how we want. Let's fight with party hats on. I don't care. Let's fight with party hats on. Make ourselves look dumb so we don't take it too seriously. That's what life is about. It's about creating things that work for you, not following a blueprint of someone else. There's no reason to. If all of our goals at the end of the world, at the end of the lifeline, is for us to live a happy life with amazing memories, then who cares? If you're not harming anyone, if you're making people happy, then let it be. You know what I mean? Like, don't overcomplicate things. Trying to dress up your fear as logistical when it's not. It's you self-sabotaging opportunities for yourself that could open doors, that could get you to break through whatever insecurities, fears, egos, and pride that you have, because so many people are hubris. And they have way too much pride, and it's so much pride that it leads to their downfall, because ego turns into self-sabotage pretty quickly when you're faced with something real. And it's just sad. It's just really sad. I'm somebody who loves to bring love, peace, beauty, bubbliness, excitement to everything. And because I know that I'm capable of doing that, and I love to do that, and I love to lift spirits, it's really sad when people don't want to allow that lifting in, because it's not about the fact that they don't love it. It's not about the fact that it's like they don't deserve to feel that way. They don't deserve to be that way. So they distance, even though it's what they want. And to me, that makes no sense, because you can be whoever the fuck you want. You can be anyone. We can be whoever we want to be. You don't have to be anybody. You don't have to do anything. Just be a good person and show up. Show up for the people around you. Show up for the people who truly care, because guess what? It is hard to meet people nowadays. It is extremely hard to meet people. It's extremely hard to make genuine connections. So when you find them, don't take them for granted. Don't act like an idiot and think that this is something that you can just throw away because this is what it is. Life is hard, and it is extremely hard to meet people that matter. So if you find someone who does, stay. Even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when it's, confusing, stay and show up. Don't be afraid. Don't give up. You giving up on someone is the equivalent of giving up on your own future, giving up on your own happiness, giving up on the potential successes you could have had if you had allowed yourself to accept the blessing. Because it's not enough. It's not enough to just know and say things. You have to embody them. And that's why for me, I just feel like people, they don't embody anything. They're just like, oh, I'm healing, oh, I'm growing, but they're not actually doing the work. You can't do the work on your own. It only happens through relationships. That's literally it. Like, people don't want to accept that because of this hyper individualist world that we live in. But neuroscience and psychology says that a majority of the things that we have that are unhealed can only be healed within a relationship. But because people keep pushing relationships away and thinking that it's the opposite way, you get all these messy situationships and all this messy stuff. It makes no sense. Like, to me, I'm like, I like you, you like me, we're together. That's it. I don't know, there shouldn't be any complications. But for some reason, people in America are just so complicated. Honestly, I'm not used to dating Americans. I've almost always dated Europeans. Absolutely hate dating in America. I think Americans are probably the bottom of the barrel when it comes to quality of men. All of the men I've ever dated and all my healthiest relationships were with European men. I miss them all so very much. So very much. Makes me want to move back to Europe just to find me a handsome European man who will treat me like I deserve, man. Because these American men, they have no idea what they're doing, and they like to pretend like they do because they're prideful and have such large egos that they can't just be a real person. They can't just admit they don't know things or that you may know better. They can't. They just can't do that. It has to be, I have to do things on my own and get to a place so that I can feel. So, you know what? Fine. Go waste your life away trying to attain this perceived version of yourself before accepting, something beautiful. That to me is lame. It's a waste of time. You're going to wake up one day, turn around and be like, oh, wow, I spent all that time by myself, all that time alone with nobody to love me because I pushed them away. Do you know how sad that is? That's very sad. So, if you're in that predicament, and I'm thinking about this because I was literally just talking about this with my friend because she's in this situation. She is very much still attracted and attached to a guy that is her ex. So I'm just like, okay, this is making me think of things. And, it's just unfortunate because people just end things prematurely. It's like, we really, our society really sucks now. Like, we've actually convinced guys that they're not worthy of being loved. Like, how sad is that? We live in a society right now where men are convinced that love has to hurt, that they need to struggle and do all these terrible things to themselves in order to earn the woman that they want. It doesn't make sense to me. In Europe, people are simple. It's like how I said, I like you, you like me, we're together. That's it. There's no complications. Like, you literally meet someone, you guys are like together in a relationship by like month 2. There's no complications because everybody's on the same page. They all date with intention. Doesn't matter if they had previous relationships or not. Typically speaking, because of cultural differences, Europe tends to be a little bit more romance oriented. So the individuals there are not afraid to fall in love. They're not afraid of relationships. They're not afraid of romance, even when it's passionate, messy, intense. They actually, in their culture, admire that and encourage that in their culture. And it leads to so much beauty. And of course, the divorce rate is less. Of course, the issues are less. Of course, relationships are lasting longer. Of course, that's what's going to happen as a result of that. And here we are, like idiots in America, acting like money and all these things, these materialistic things, like getting our lives together, is like somehow going to change that life is hard. Something will always happen. Something will always get messed up. Life doesn't respect your plans. It doesn't care, okay? If you're walking up a flight of stairs and the stairs are all pink, but then you get to a step that suddenly turns blue, are you seriously not going to keep climbing up the steps because of the fact that there's one blue step? No, you're probably going to step on the blue step and then keep going. But again, a lot of times people will either stay stuck on the blue step and be like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable and scary, I don't know what to do, and freeze and stay stuck there. Or they will be too afraid to even step on the step and stay stuck underneath their own potential. Then you have other people like me, and hopefully you guys watching, that don't care. They're willing to take the risk. They're willing to do the leap of faith. They're willing to jump. So they go straight to that white, like that blue that blue step, and then they continue walking even when the colors change its path. So this is why I'm always telling people, like, you need to allow yourself to breathe and be free and to love and be real. Like, life is way too short for all this drama that people create for themselves. I'm like, look, dude, while you're overanalyzing, overthinking, and complicating everything, I'm just sitting here waiting for hugs and kisses. And that's the irony. It's like I feel like people are meeting me with aggression and intensity, and I'm just here trying to, like, throw up kisses and love and hug and peace. And for some reason, that is like, oh my God, don't give me that. And so I'm like, wow, y'all are really just wow. And it's like every single person is like this, literally every single person. I'm like, man, I don't understand what happened to people. I'm like, if you seriously think that your past negative relationship is how all relationships should be, that's extremely naive and extremely rigid. That's like, doesn't allow for any nuances, doesn't take account into the actual individuals themselves. It's like, guys, build better relationships with the people around you, because this will dictate your life. You are the average of the individuals you spend your time with. The partner you choose will dictate your happiness and your success. And people don't take that seriously, but it's the truth. It is real scientific truth. I'm not giving you guys like, oh my God, I love romance. Like, this is real science. This is not me talking about feelings here. This is what real logic sounds like. Not the voices in your head that try to convince you that your fear makes sense and your ego and pride should stay protected. But I'm talking about real science. Like the stuff that people learn in schools. Okay, this is real science. This is real logic, not that. And real logic says, again, that you are the average of the people you spend your time with, and your partner is a big player in that. How they behave in their own life, how they show up in the world, how they treat themselves, how they treat you, how they treat others in the world, that will show you who you are and who you become. So choose the people around you wisely. Choose them wisely. That's why it's like, if you connect with someone and it's authentic, don't waste it. Don't waste it. Don't force yourself to suffer in misery because you're insecure in your abilities to show up. Just show up and figure it out later. There are no rules. What are you showing up for? Just enter the room and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing I don't understand, is like, people don't realize that they have the power to control their own lives. You don't need to do things by any specific standard. Just live your life and do good things that don't harm others, but stay happy. Don't follow the rule book of other people when they're not even living the life that you want. It makes no sense. And that is why it brings me to this ultimate conclusion, that preparing for the end isn't about survival tactics. It's about becoming the kind of person people survive with. Being the kind of person who people want to help and be around, and who want your help too. You know, show up for the people around you, and be a part of the world around you, and the people around you will show up for you when it's time. Don't expect the world to give you handouts. That's all I'm really trying to tell people. Don't expect that, because life is hard. Life ain't never gonna do that for you. So don't even expect it anymore. Thank you guys so much for watching if you're on YouTube, and thank you guys so much for listening if you're here on Spotify. I want to know what you guys think about today's episode. Please let me know. You're always welcome to either comment on the platform or meet me on my DMs or my comment section on Instagram, where I'm most active. I love to hear your guys' thoughts on things and just know what it is you're thinking. And yeah, I really thank you guys for being here, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Dear Diary, today I dressed like the end of the world was already here. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Not in armor, but in softness disguised as strategy. I wore charcoal gray like ash from a fire we never put out, a long sleeve that fell off my shoulder because sometimes collapse is quiet. Sometimes it looks like fraying seams and threadbare truth. My hands stayed bare because there's something sacred about not covering up the tools that still give, hold, and build. No rings, no symbols of ownership, only a single chain around my neck. Light enough to forget it's there, but heavy enough to remind me I carry the weight of empathy like currency. And my body moved slowly, not because I was tired, but because there's no rush when you're fully present. When the cameras rolled, I wasn't performing, I was remembering that in the absence of systems, and the silence of leadership, and the decay of every machine we thought would save us, what's left is presence. What's left is people. What's left is the version of me who doesn't run from love when it gets heavy. So I dressed like her, and I said, let's talk about it. Because if we're going to survive the apocalypse, we better learn how to show up like the world depends on it. Because it does. XOXO. LJ. Yes! Alrighty. Well, I love you guys so very much. I'll see you in the next video. Peace on the streets.